Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Back with another recipe from Claire Saffitz's Dessert Person in the foundational section of the book again. This one's called Pâte. I've seen it made, I've never made it myself, so I'm slightly concerned because this does seem a little bit intimidating, and I remember my mom having struggles with her cream puffs collapsing. So hopefully the tips that Claire's included in the book will help me avoid a negative situation here. So the ingredients for the cream puff dough, just a handful of things that you've probably got on hand already, and then it's just the technique for how you actually do this. So it sounds straightforward, but let's get right into it. So in my medium saucepan over medium to low heat, I've got 7 tablespoons of unsalted butter. To that, I'm adding some whole milk, along with granulated white sugar and some kosher salt. Also adding in the ½ cup of water. And we're just going to stir this stuff around gently until it's fully melted and comes up to kind of a bare simmer. Since we've got milk over heat, you want to be mindful to kind of keep it moving. Don't put the heat too high, you can scorch that milk, and that's not going to be a great time if you do. All right, great. So it's been about 15 minutes. We've got some bubble action happening on the surface. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So now I'm going to take my AP flour and dump it in all at once. And I'm going to gently stir this just to get it saturated into that mixture. I've also turned the heat up to medium, so we're not on medium-low, now we're fully on medium. And the recipe says to do this with a wooden spoon. Embarrassingly, I don't have a wooden spoon. So I'm just using my rubber spatulas, these OXO ones that I really like. I think it kind of gets the same job done. It's got a flat edge, so I think we should be okay there. So it wants us to knock this dough kind of from side to side up against the edges. Basically what we're doing is cooking this dough on the stovetop, so we're cooking off all of that kind of like raw flour flavor. We're also driving out some of that additional liquid, so we should see a film start to appear on the bottom of the pan. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, but there's a little bit of a haziness down there, and that haze should be reincorporated into the dough. That's how we'll know when we're done. And it should take about 3 minutes total. Oh, this is such a workout. And that's been 3 minutes. I'm seeing that the film is starting to get lifted up, though I do still have some film on the bottom. So I'm going to continue kind of knocking this around for another minute or two until that's fully gone. Cool, and I've been stirring for about 5 minutes here. I think that that film looks pretty much fully reincorporated back into the dough. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat and we can move on to the next step. So we've got the dough hot off the stove, and now we're going to pop this into the bowl of our stand mixer. And we're putting it in here just for a few minutes to let it cool down so we don't scramble the eggs when we add it into the dough. All right, so this dough has been resting in the bowl of the stand mixer for about 2 minutes, so I think it's cooled down from scorching hot to just hot. I'm going to turn the stand mixer on medium-low speed, and then what we're going to do is add the eggs one at a time, adding up to 5 eggs. So you have to reevaluate your progress on dough texture after each egg. We'll turn this up to medium. All right. And so I can tell just by looking at it, this is far too thick for what we're looking for, so I'm going to add the second egg. Realistically, I think you'll probably need 4 or 5 eggs. I don't think 1, 2, or 3 are realistically an option. So I'm going to put this back on low speed and we'll drop this second one in here. And you can tell that once you put the egg in, the dough kind of falls apart, looks all scrambled and curdly and just like a mess. And then as you mix it, it comes back together. So once it comes back together into kind of a homogeneous mass, that's when you can add in the next egg. All right, so that's definitely super thick and not pipeable. Let's drop in egg number 3. So if you don't have a stand mixer, you can definitely do this by hand. I'm gonna be fully honest. Stirring on the stove was a bit of a workout because it's kind of high in the air and you're stirring something that's thick and dense. It's only getting thicker, denser, lumpier, and more challenging. So technically, yes, you can do it without a stand mixer. You might not love your experience. If you've got kids or a helper or someone who can do this stirring for you, maybe that's a good delegation task. All right, and so this dough's come back together. You can see the texture here is looking a lot nicer. It's starting to actually look like a proper dough. However, I can tell that this is still super thick. We're looking for something that's flowing and has a little bit of movement to it. So we're gonna go ahead and add in the next egg here. So that's been 4 eggs total. Let's see what the texture is looking like here. So you can see it's super thick. When we lift this up, it's just a little bit too thick. What we're looking for is to kind of run off, not like ribbons, but it should drip off the end of the spatula into kind of a V formation. This is a little bit too thick still. So I think we are gonna need the 5th egg in this instance, but again, this is the visual cue you're looking for. If yours looks like this, you need the extra egg. If yours is kind of looking nice, you can stop early. Okay, I think we're in good shape. And this is what we're looking for. So it comes to a V and it slowly kind of runs off the paddle. So this is exactly it. So that's what you should be looking like. So if your dough looks like that after 4 eggs, then that's the appropriate number of eggs. If it takes 5 eggs to get you there though, that's 100% okay. Perfect. So our pâte choux dough is looking nice. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the counter just a bit, and then we can go ahead and pipe out the cream puffs. All right, cool. So we are just about there. I've got the oven preheating up to 425. I've got my baking trays prepped with sheets of parchment paper that I've traced 1-inch circles onto, 1-inch diameter. And I've traced this in Sharpie on the underside of the parchment. You don't want that touching the food. The recipe makes 70 cream puffs in total. So I've got 35 on this sheet and then 35 on the second sheet. And then I've got my pastry bag, or my piping bag rather. When you're filling your pastry or your piping bag, you really don't want to go too much over half full. The more full it is, the further your hand is from the tip, meaning you have less control over where you're piping to. So let's get piping. Claire said to not really move the piping bag, but rather to just let the dough kind of flow in and fill the shapes. I'm coming in at about a 45-degree angle, applying even pressure, and there we go. I should mention I'm using a number 12 tip. It's about a 1/4 inch opening. You don't need to use a piping tip for this step. So if you prefer to just snip a hole in the end of a piping bag or even in the tip or the corner rather of a Ziploc bag, you'll be a-okay there. So I'm using the cream puffs today to make a croquembouche. So there's an extra recipe that I'm putting on the top of here. This is the crackling cookie, and it's just a little bit of like a hat. You're not pushing it down. You're not trying to do anything, you're literally balancing it just on the top. If you don't want this, this is an optional step. You could just do some egg wash on here. Knock down the little nubbies. So whisk up an egg, gently brush. This tray is ready to go. I'm gonna set it aside and then I'm gonna do the exact same thing for another tray of 35 cream puffs. So we'll probably skip that. I don't think you need to watch that again. So I'll see you when we're ready to bake. So we've got the second tray done and now we are ready to bake. So I've got the oven preheated to 425 degrees. I'm gonna pop these in on the upper and lower third of the oven. Immediately drop the temperature to 375. After 20 minutes, we're going to flip top to bottom and front to back and finish baking for another 10 to 15 minutes. So total bake time around 35. So, but keep an eye on them. You want to make sure that they're golden brown and look like they're fully cooked. So here goes everything. Let's see. The cream puffs bake for a total of 30 minutes, and then I let them cool in the oven with the door cracked for another 15. So overall, generally good puffiness. I tried to bake that leftover crackling on its own. That did not work, so that's, I don't recommend. Additionally, I think my parchment caught on fire on the edges, so I do have some darker spots. I know my oven has really hot spots along the walls of the oven regardless, so baking slightly uneven, not too bad. What we need to do now, somewhat urgently, is poke little holes in the bottom of all of these cream puffs. One by one, I'm taking a paring knife. Oh, they're so light. Just poking a little tiny hole in the bottom, and I'm going to leave that whole side up just to let the steam escape. So basically, if you don't poke these holes, the steam can cause the cream puff to collapse as it cools. Cool, so we've got all the holes poked in these. Now we need to let them come down to room temperature. I'm thinking this is probably going to take about 10 to 15 minutes. They're really not that hot to the touch and they're full of air, so they should cool relatively quickly. And once they're cool, we can fill them. So the cream puffs are fully cooled. The pastry cream has been loosened with the mascarpone cheese. Let's get to filling. So I've never filled cream puffs before. I'll start with this one that got a little burnt on the edge so that if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, so you can kind of start to feel that there's a little, oh, this one I probably overfilled slightly because it's kind of coming out. You can start to feel that there's a little bit of like a pressure change, like you've kind of hit the fullness capacity of the cream puff. See, I overfilled that one a little bit too. It started to peak out again after I stopped squeezing. It's a fine line between underfilling and overfilling. You know, counting might be a strategy. If you're able to apply consistent pressure throughout the squeeze, that might be a way to go. All right, tray one done. Not really feeling like I've got a rhythm, not really feeling super confident, but we're making progress. So I hope that these are good once we get into them. And look at that, nearly perfect ratio of cream puffs to filling. I was about 3 cream puffs short of the full recipe yield, and I've probably got enough filling to do 2 to 3 more cream puffs. So Claire did the math perfectly on this. So now I'm actually feeling a little bit better about my filling situation because I ran out at the appropriate time, which makes me think I must have used the appropriate amount. So we'll see. All right, so the pâte choux is baked up into cream puff form, and I've got the pastry cream inside, which is my favorite way to enjoy it. So this is the finished product. Let's give it a taste. Nice and crispy. The texture of the dough is really light. It's got a little bit of crunch to it from the crackling that we put on top. That's an optional step. Highly recommend. You can see kind of the texture here, lots of little pockets inside, so this definitely puffed up during the baking process and did exactly what we wanted it to. Overall, huge fan. The pâte choux dough, so easy to make. I was so intimidated going in, but it came together in a breeze, so really tasty and definitely recommend.